Welcome everyone. I hope everyone is doing okay and ready for another exciting session for BESA. Um, Probably everyone is joining us second time. If you are a first timer, welcome. If you are a second timer, I would say thank you for being again here. Really happy to have you all here. We have a lot of people today to support you, so I'll quickly add them all to the stage, and they would be talking about various aspects, and they would be also sharing their own knowledge into this particular session. Thank you. I'll add Richard to stage. So Richard is here. Then we have Kapil. Then we have Remy also joining us. Then we have Nicole. You may have met her in last time. Then we have Sharik, obviously Prasad and Parna also. So you could see full house here. It's really nice to be seeing all the faces here, and we will help you out as much as we can. We are receiving a lot of emails. We are trying to respond as many as we can. But in case we are not able to respond, feel free to respond to ask us again. Probably ping us on LinkedIn, and we should be happy to answer as much as we can. All right. So thanks everyone, and we will keep moving forward. I'll quickly introduce you to what I am going to talk about, and then we will go into the technical session. So we will have lots of things coming up. Let me start presenting my screen, and we will go ahead from there. Okay, between any questions if you have, feel free. You should be able to go ahead and ask questions to all of us. We are responding to the chat, so this should not be a problem at all. And keep asking as many questions as you have. Okay, give me a minute. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. I'm removing others from the stage so that we can use the uh, more screen area for ourselves. I'm managing it on a laptop. I'm not in my traditional setup, so it takes little time for me to manage some of the stuff here, but hopefully everything should be fine. All right. So we are on batch 05, week 02, and we would be discussing lots and lots of stuff today also. Now, I want to ask you a very basic question to get started first, that why you are joining PESA. What is your motivation to wake up on a Saturday and join Become a Solution Architect session? Why you are joining? I want to understand the motivation behind it, so we know that we are catering to the right audience or we are catering the right content to you. So let me know why you are joining Become a Solution Architect a session on a Sunday morning. What is your motivation? What compels you to be awake maybe in an odd time zone and join us? We got a response. I want to become a solution architect. Guided learning, agree. To become a solution architect from AWS folks, to join AWS, a way of explanation and content. I agree on that. Thank you. As we'll dive into practical things, I want to learn AWS in depth. I also want to work as a security architect. Then you want to become a solution architect also. You want to have a job interview done. Makes sense. Networking and lots and DevOps engineer to develop skills into cloud. So yeah, these make sense. These are common things which you are looking for. Now, my question to you is on the follow-up that if you want to become a solution architect or you want to become a successful cloud personal, maybe in terms of technology, maybe security, what are the common qualities somebody would have if you're seeing that person that he is a solution architect or he is a network engineer or she is a support person? What would be some common qualities that person would be having? He or she would have those common qualities to become a successful cloud professional. What it could be? What could be the qualities somebody would have to become a successful solution architect or be a successful cloud engineer or a cloud architect? Problem solver, excellent communication. I do not deny that. So yeah, that is something which we would be needing. So yeah, engagement and interest, that's fine. Then we would be needing having has attention to detail, that is also required. In-depth knowledge, obviously that is also required. We also need communication skill. We need to manage stakeholders, also agree on that. That's also a very requirement still. And then you need to have some communication skills also, so that also makes sense. So that's true. These are some common things there. Patience, I agree on that also. So patience is also something, Pradnya, that you would need it. Business acumen, agree. These are all the things needed. Real-time activities or real-time experience, yes, that will be good thing to have, Naveen, but not ever. That is how we would be talking about. Practical experience, agree on that. Knowledge of architecture, understand how all these things work. Obsession, customer obsession. I like that, Prabhat. Yeah, these are common things. I would add one more thing to this mix, that I would say consistency. Whatever you do, that should be a consistent effort which you are putting into, and that consistency would be very very required for anything you do into life, whether it is you are pursuing a relationship, whether you are pursuing a career, whether you're pursuing a technical knowledge. You would need that consistency. And if you're joining a second time, that shows the consistency, and we hope that you would be able to maintain the consistency over a period of time, and we should be able to give you enough content so that we can keep you engaged. And if we can improve something, let us know. We would be happy to improve it. I'm sharing a screen here just to let you know that what we are going to discuss into this particular week. So we are on week number 2. We will talk about domain to security and compliance, that would be driven by Nicole and Richard. Then we'll talk about quizzes, which we are trying to provide a mechanism or a platform for you to test your skill, and that will be driven by Remy. Remy will talk about that, and then I'll talk about well architected, and if time permits, we'll go for behavioral track also, where Prasad will help us out on that. There was a request that will this be available later as a recording? Yes, that would be available as a recording. That will be always there in recording format, so you should be able to see these things. So this is our format on week 2. This is we will keep moving forward from now. I want to talk about a very specific thing, that let's say I ask you a question, that who is an architect? Obviously, you are here to become a solution architect. So I'm trying to ask you a question. Let's see what you think of an architect. I would share my answer also, and we would see that how you can relate to the answer I am saying. I would give you a generalist answer, but what you think is a solution architect, or what is and who is an architect? That is a very common question which I'm asking here. Who designs solution? Agree. Agree. So Anupama, that is completely agree that you would need someone who is designs a solution. Who is an architect? Share your thoughts. Yeah, exactly, Parna. Thanks for sharing it. And anyone who thinks that I'm not looking for a very bookish knowledge or a bookish definition. Anyone which can give us a who design solution based on desired outcome, align business requirement, get requirement and implement guidances. Who does the blueprint exactly? Who builds the design? Who helps cut the who helps us to take the decision, a decision, a planning? Who is good at building robust infrastructure? Agree on that, Sumit, completely fine. To solve business problem, Gurumurthy is talking about design a system that work for a business use case within the constraint. Yeah, these are all the valid options. I take it on little lighter note, and I will share what my definition of being an architect is. So my definition of being architect is someone who can answer almost every question with it depends. As an architect, if you are asking us that, okay, should I use service X or service Y? I would say depend. Should I go for this particular approach, or should I go for that particular approach, or should I use this model or that model? I would always say it depends, because I cannot decide based on black and white information. There is always lots of things to understand before you create a solution for a problem. So what you need to do, you need to understand that you are not just designing a solution because you know the technology. You are designing a solution because you want to solve a business problem, and that business problem may be driven by various factors. So maybe in one situation a specific solution is great, but in second situation it may not be great at all, because there are some compliance issues with that, or maybe it is not solving the purpose I am looking for. So whenever you are an architect, you have to think broader, not just keeping your vision narrow on a solution, but you have to understand that how it actually solve the actual business problem we are looking into. So that's my definition of who is being an architect. So I hope this is giving you some more idea, and I'll expand on this thing when we talk about well architected. We'll discuss lots and lots stuff about being a solution architect and what it takes to become a great solution architect. We'll talk about it. All right, so that was my definition. Obviously you don't have to agree on it, so but yes, I would say it depends. So yeah, Prabhat is saying interview for essay. Tell me about yourself, and then you can say it depends. Yes, it depends. You could say it depends. Do you want to hear for me for 5 minutes, or do you want to hear from me about myself for 1 hour? It depends on that, and based on that, you should be able to respond to your interviewer, right? But yeah, it depends on situation. Okay, let me now add Nicole and Richard on stage. We will go with the same method. We will try to create a situation where the customer is having some solutions requirement, and then we would help as a consultant. So let me add Richard to screen and let me add Nicole to screen, and they would drive conversation today about how a customer would talk about identity, security, and compliances. That's what I'm going to talk about. All right. All over to you, Nicole and Richard. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, let me share my screen. Share screen. Oh, everyone can see it now.
Sorry, I just realized I was on mute, Nicole.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Before you come through the door and I give you advice, we're going to talk about the shared responsibility model.
I was just saying that what we're going to do is we're going to follow the same approach as last week, where we're going to have a conversation. But the scenario this week is going to be a customer migrating from their on-prem data center to AWS, and they've got a whole bunch of questions, security concerns. You know, they've got some security services that they're using in their data center, and they're looking to migrate those over to AWS. So I was just kind of setting the framework for the conversation that we're going to have. But before we do that, I believe you're going to talk about the shared responsibility model, yeah?
Exactly. So there is no security and compliance conversation without the shared responsibility model in AWS. Why is that? So you will see this slide maybe in different color schemes in nearly every training, or at least it will be mentioned in every training. Why is that? A lot of people don't realize that when you go to the cloud, it's not like, okay, here, take my workload, and yeah, you take care of everything. This is not how it works. The moment you get access to an AWS account, you get also a lot of responsibility, not just for cost, but also for security. So, but not everything is your problem, because you can't influence everything. And this is why we talk about shared responsibility. So when you look at the slide at the bottom, you see what AWS's responsibility is, namely the security of the cloud. That means we are responsible for our data centers, that they are safe, that the people that work there know what they're doing, that our hardware is in order, that we patch it, make sure that things that are no longer working are being replaced, that we pay our electricity bill, that everything is cooled that needs to be cooled. So all these kind of things we take care of. In addition to that, if you are using something that is labeled as a managed service, for example, DynamoDB, then we also take care that this service is available to you. You don't need to worry about patching a managed service and making sure it's always up and running. That again is also AWS responsibility, because we label it as a managed service, meaning you can focus on what is relevant to you, and you don't have to do things to just keep the lights on or keep something functioning. However, now we come to the customer responsibilities. So everything that is happening in the cloud is your responsibility. What does that mean? Well, that means that if you spin up an EC2 instance and you decide to put a machine image on there and an operating system and what have you, you need to make sure that all of these components are taken care of. You need to patch the software that you put on an EC2 instance. That is not AWS responsibility. You also are responsible to ensure, and this is what we're talking about today, that only individuals who should have access to something gain access to something, and only as long as they need to. Then on top of that, you see that customer data or in general data that you put in the cloud is your responsibility. You should really make sure that this data is safe, can only be accessed as and if needed by people who are allowed to access it, and ideally you're also encrypted. So all these kind of things you need to be aware of, because if you are not and think someone else will take care of it, you might get into trouble. So for any exam, you should really know what this means, what the different responsibilities are, but also in your day-to-day work, you should always be aware, is this something that I need to consider when I build my architecture, or do I not need to worry because this is AWS's responsibility? Good. Then let's move on to our role play. Richard, welcome to my office. How can I help you?
Model there. Just to add, just quickly to that, I like to think of the shared I mean, we deal with shared responsibility models all the time, right? In everyday life, we deal with shared responsibility models. You think about the key in your front door and the lock in your front door. You didn't manufacture it, you didn't make the key, but you trust that the people that did made a lock and made a key that works. You have the responsibility to operate that system. So if you wander out of your front door and leave your front door wide open, you're going to get burgled. And it's the same with the AWS shared responsibility model. So I just thought, it's no different. The shared responsibility model is really no different to models that we operate, unthinkingly in our lives all day, every day. So anyway, I just thought I'd add that. So let's go into our role play now. So
yes.
Okay, so Nicole, I have a data center. We've been running our applications happily in our data center for a very, very, very long time. And we've decided we want to take advantage of the agility and potential cost optimization of moving into AWS. But we have some concerns from our security team. They don't really understand the AWS model. At the moment, when our engineers want to access our systems, then obviously we've got all the standard access control systems that you would have inside the data center. But, we've heard about this subject, identity and access management, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about how we can give access to our engineers to AWS. So how does that work?
Well, AWS has a tool, identity access management, and it's usually applied with the principle of least privilege in mind. So this is something that we reiterate all the time, meaning you should only give people the necessary permissions for as long as they need them to perform a specific task, right? You shouldn't just give permissions to everyone just because it's easier. You should really think about who is allowed to do what and for how long.
Okay.
So, and IAM, as we call it in short, allows you to provide very granular permissions to your teams. And how do we do that? Well, the most standard piece that you might maybe also know is a user, right? So that's a human being in most cases with long-term credentials. And these credentials kind of lead to them logging in and then having access to all the permissions you have assigned to this user. Well, by default, IAM locks everything down, meaning you can create a user, but the policy will not contain any permissions, so they're not allowed to do anything. So you will have actively to put in place policies for this user that enable that user to interact with AWS services. So a user is a little bit of a tricky thing, though. First of all, it's obviously pretty time consuming if you have 10,000 employees and they all need a user. You're doing a lot of work. Secondly, long-term credentials are a bit problematic because they need rotating, right? And this user knows exactly what those credentials are. So we can work around this problem, but by saying, okay, a user will never get their credential, but they will access the services through federation, right? SSO, for example. So this way you can limit a little bit the risk that is driven by having credentials. We know there are still humans that use password 123 as their password, which might not be a good idea. And this way you can avoid that. But as I said, it's nothing you really want to do because it's not the most efficient and the most secure thing to go about assigning permissions. So this is why we also have a concept of a group, which makes your life a bit easier when it comes to assigning permissions. So if you, for example, have 10 administrators that need to have the very same permissions to do their job, then you could create a policy that lists what this group of people is allowed to do, attach it to a group, and then just put the users into this group. Benefit is, if this user changes role or leaves the company, you just remove them from the group, and that's it. They no longer have those permissions that the administrator group had. And you can relatively easily adjust the permissions for a large number of people rather than having to go to each and every individual and change their policy, right? But again, it's also a little bit tricky, right? You still have potentially long-term permissions in there. So and this is where the concept of a role comes in. A role is a really good concept because it only provides short-term credentials or temporary permissions to trusted entities. For example, if I'm in my normal day life a developer, but all of a sudden someone says, for an hour or so you're going to be a tester, then I could just assume for this hour the role of a tester and would get access, for example, to the testing environment, which I usually don't have access to. The nice thing is, because it's short-term credentials, you don't need to worry about rotating them or anything like that, because they will cease to exist the moment the time is up, so to speak. So this is why a role is usually a security best practice, because it's short-term credentials. They are only provided as and if needed. And once they expire, people have to reauthorize, or they have no longer access if you have revoked access to this role.
Awesome. Okay, thanks for that, Nicole. You mentioned, just a quick follow-up question there. We use Active Directory for access to all our systems in our current data center. And you mentioned with a role that we could have, I think you said it was called a trusted entity. Could that trusted entity be something like an Active Directory user?
Yes, exactly. You can give, you can make an Active Directory user a trusted entity. You can also make an AWS infrastructure component, like an EC2 instance, for example, a trusted entity as well.
Oh, I see. Okay, so services can assume roles as well.
Exactly.
Ah, perfect. Okay, that's great to know. Thank you for that. Awesome. Okay, so the other thing that we've been having a brief where we've been investigating, we don't really fully understand it yet, but we've been investigating, is we have multiple different applications and we have multiple different departments. Now, I've looked at some best practice guidance, and it says that we shouldn't perform what AWS claim is account overcrowding. So we think we're going to need multiple AWS accounts. But we've had people in our organization who've gone and set up AWS accounts with credit cards, and they're completely unrelated to each other. There's no connection between them kind of naturally. So we're kind of concerned that if we go and set up multiple AWS accounts, we're giving ourselves a real problem in terms of management. How do we manage multiple AWS accounts and make sure that those accounts follow, say, all our internal governance standards? And also, you know, Bob in IT, he went and set up his AWS account and he pays his credit card bill, and Jane set up her AWS account and she pays her credit card bill. We can't be servicing credit card bills every month, so we need one bill. So how would that work on AWS?
So we have a service called AWS Organizations, which is an account management service, and with that service you can actually consolidate a large number of accounts. You can bill centrally, so we will just kind of send all the bills those accounts incur in a consolidated manner to whoever is the owner of that billing in your organization. But the other nice side effect, and you didn't really mention that, so if all those people in your organization open their own accounts with their credit cards, how do you actually ensure that they follow security best practices, right? We just talked about security. because some of them might not be fully trained or fully aware. So imagine they have a root user, which is like the user you automatically get when you open your account.
Mhm.
And that user has all permissions you can possibly dream of. So if you're not aware how much damage you can do.
Yeah, that's a real risk for us, actually, because they are running workloads in those accounts.
Exactly. So imagine one of those root user credentials ends up on the internet. Anyone who has those credentials can get into this account and they can do whatever they like. So it's a bit risky, especially the more you have of those risky accounts, the worse it gets, right? And the organization's service helps with that as well, because in an organization, you will have a management account. And this management account sets basically the policies for everything that is part of this organization. So this management account obviously has a root user, but any account that is part of this organization will not have a proper root user like you have when you open your own account, because you can make sure that there are boundaries set to what can be done in each of those accounts. So you can, at an organization level, decide what certain accounts can or cannot do, and also what kind of services they're allowed to use or not to use, right? If you need to be compliant with something, and you are like, we haven't evaluated the service yet, you might just block it. Same for regions, right? If you don't want people to build things in Australia, you can make sure that nobody in this organization can access an Australian region, for example. So, but how does it look afterwards? So once you have your management account, coming back to your problem of your multiple teams, multiple applications, you could give each application or each team, depending on how you want to set it up, an organizational unit. So in this unit, then you have accounts. For example, you could have for your application A, an organizational unit. And in this one, you would have one account, which is the development account, another one that is the test account. And then production would maybe sit in a different organizational unit because another team takes care of it once it's in production. The nice thing is that you can exactly see what each of those organizational units and accounts in those units is driving cost-wise. And you can be sure that no one who is not allowed to go into another account accesses that without you giving the permission to do so, or giving them a role that can temporarily go across account or across an organizational unit. So you have full control, and nobody can do anything that you don't want them to do, even if they would have root user access of that specific account in that unit. Sounds good?
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. No, that looks really good. So just to recap there. So the organizational unit is basically a way to group accounts that have similar compliance requirements. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Lovely. Thank you for that, Nicole. So speaking about compliance, you mentioned earlier, we are in scope for PCI compliance. And you mentioned earlier, or you spoke earlier about the shared responsibility model. Okay. Now, one thing that I'm not entirely certain about is, like I said, we're in scope for PCI compliance, and we have to go through an audit. Okay. If we don't have responsibility, or we don't have access to those underlying components, if AWS are managing them for us, how can I ensure that I can tick that box in the PCI compliance audit to say, yeah, AWS, this isn't us doing this, this is AWS doing this. So how can I ensure that I can build a PCI compliance service on AWS?
So we have independent auditors that audit us for all kinds of things. And we have a wide range of certifications for our data centers. So PCI compliance is among those things.
Okay.
But obviously need access to the reports, right? And we don't necessarily put everything in detail on our public website. But in order for customers to get the information they need without having to go through too many hoops, we have a service called AWS Artifact. That one is accessible through the AWS console. And there you find all the compliance reports that you might need to provide to your auditor to make sure that you can prove that you are PCI compliant because we are PCI compliant, right? This also applies to ISV partners. So if you decide at some point to use a third party via marketplace, an ISV solution, you can also find their reports in AWS Artifact and download.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, so basically we're inheriting for the areas of the shared responsibility model that are within your domain, within the AWS domain, we're basically inheriting that compliance by using AWS.
Exactly.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. So just sticking on the subject of security, we're thinking about, we've been spending a lot of time recently thinking about DDoS mitigation. We did actually suffer quite a large attack last year, and we ended up going to a third party, and it was complicated and difficult. We had to proxy through them. We did eventually manage to get it cleared up, but it took a long time. It's only a matter of time really before it happens again. And I was just wondering, what protections can AWS offer for these kinds of incidents?
Okay, so we have two kind of services. One is specifically for DDoS attacks. The other one is more of a web application firewall. So AWS WAF, Web Application Firewall, is a service that monitors your web requests, right? And then controls access to the content, meaning if you're allowed to access the application, you will get access to it. If not, you get a lovely 403 error. However, that doesn't do much when you are exposed to a really large DDoS attack. And for that, we have AWS Shield, which comes in two flavors. It is enabled by default. You don't have to do anything, and it's free of charge. And it is a purpose-built service to provide protection against the most common DDoS attacks on AWS resources. However, chances are that your company needs a little bit more than just that. And for that, we have Shield Advanced. Shield Advanced provides protection at layer 3, 4, and 7. And you also get access to a dedicated team was the worst to happen. Meaning you get all the support you can possibly need from AWS should the worst happen, to ensure we can mitigate that attack as much as possible and ensure you have also full visibility on what was happening.
Awesome. Okay. So there's two levels of Shield, and I think you said that the Shield standard service is free and everyone just gets it, right?
Exactly. You don't have to do anything.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much. So while we're talking about exposures, we have been exposed a couple of times because of package vulnerabilities that we have in our application. These are obviously packages running on servers in our own data center. If we move these servers to AWS and use a service like EC2, how can I use those? How can I detect those? Is there anything that I can use to detect those vulnerabilities and act on them without having to, have complicated third-party tools and all that kind of stuff?
Yep. So we have a wide range of security services that you can use to protect yourself or your workloads from whatever comes your way. Obviously, we're not going into all of those, but a specific one to the problem you just mentioned is Amazon Inspector. So it's an automated and continual vulnerability management service, which detects software vulnerabilities. So it scans all of your workloads, your EC2 instances, and makes sure if there's anything that could be a potential vulnerability, that this is kind of marked. So what it also does is when you have software running, and I hope you do have a software bill of materials, it helps you also to centrally manage that, right? Because a software bill of materials is only as good as the person that regularly keeps it up to date. Because if you don't know what the software components are that you have in your products, or it's outdated, it gets really difficult to actually assess where are my vulnerabilities or how critical are certain things, right? Yeah. So it helps you with that as well.
We've had problems tracking that in the past. Yeah.
So that might be a good idea then to kind of use Inspector also for that. You can scan at the moment with agents. There's also a limited trial going on with agentless scanning. And then last but not least, and that's actually the most valuable part, in my opinion, about the service, is it doesn't just say, here, this is all the risk that you have, but it actually analyzes everything and provides you with a risk score. So your teams can actually focus on whatever is the highest risk for you and get started with that, and not spend a lot of time on something that is maybe a risk, but very, very small to compare to something else, right? So, and you can even, if you're using other solutions, try and automate some of the remediation potentially. So there's also little helpers on Marketplace where you can integrate into third-party solutions to automate some of the remediation. So, and it is not just available for EC2 instances, but Inspector also works with Lambda and with container images stored in ECR.
Okay.
So it goes a bit wider than just EC2 instances.
Okay, so when we, I mean, we're initially planning to do a lift and shift into AWS, but we're looking to evolve towards a container infrastructure, or perhaps even experiment with serverless, so we can get coverage from Inspector as well. Awesome.
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay. So moving on then to, we've got a key management infrastructure internally in our own data center. We're a regulated industry. We need to ensure that everything is, all of our data is encrypted at rest. Managing this key management infrastructure is, we don't want to manage it. You know, it's a burden for our IT teams. We have to manage the high availability. We have to, you know, make sure that the keys are replicated around multiple sites. We don't actually have multiple data centers, but we still have to get the keys out of the data center because, you know, if it fails, we've lost all our data. What can AWS do to help us here?
So we have a key management service, which presumably will be a relief for your IT team, if I understood you correctly. So in this key management service, you can generate keys. Either we generate the full key, or if you want to bring own key material, that is also an option. But we also store, manage, and you can also audit within key management service the keys that you have. Keys that were completely created by us with our key material are automatically rotated every year. So you don't even have to worry about you know, forgetting potentially to rotate your key once per year. We do that automatically for you. And then you can use those keys to encrypt data across different services as you need to, right? So without a worry in the world that, you know, comes with running your own infrastructure. So you can see that you can even on the slide here, you can audit KMS as well with CloudWatch and CloudTrail. So you have also a little bit control over that service here. So yeah.
Awesome. And you mentioned AWS services with KMS. So can I use KMS to automatically encrypt data that I'm storing in AWS services like S3, for example?
Yes, you can do that.
Perfect. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, yeah, that'll be a big relief to our teams who are currently having to manage these keys themselves. And again, remaining with security. So we currently collect a lot of log files that describe network flows within our environment. So traffic comes in, we log it. Traffic goes out, we log it. We're trying to tap pretty much everything in our environment. The problem that we have is that we're collecting all of these logs and we tend to use them reactively. You know, we use them for troubleshooting. We use them if we suspect a security issue, but we don't really have anything that's proactively analyzing those logs that can tell us, you know, there is a security issue here, or there's a potential security issue, or you're being IP scanned or whatever. So we want something that can help us act on logs as well, maybe even automatically. Can AWS offer us anything like this?
So we have Amazon Guard Duty, which is intelligent threat detection. So it's actually ML-powered threat detection. So it continuously learns from the threats that are out there. So it can actually use its knowledge to proactively look at what is going on in your world. and then raise an alarm if need be. The nice thing about it is that it's one of our fully managed services. Your team doesn't need to worry about it, right? You enable it and off it goes. We are responsible because it's fully managed, that it's always up and running, and it scales as needed. So there's also no worry on that side. It will continuously monitor your environment without you having to switch it off and switch it on and remember to do it. It will do so 24/7. And then it will also provide you with end-to-end visibility into your workloads. So you will have presumably clearer visibility than you have at the moment with going manually through log files. And it also integrates with other solutions on AWS to provide then these findings in a single pane of glass if you want to.
That sounds really, really good. Yeah, because I mean, we did get into a situation where we had some of our admins who were trying to write scripts to parse the log files and, look for sort of common attacks like things like SSH brute force attacks and things like that. So I'm guessing from what you're saying that Guard Duty will pick those things up and alert on them automatically, yes?
Exactly.
Just from the contents of the log files.
Exactly. It will look at all of that, and then whatever workflow your team wants to implement to automate remediation further, they can do so as well.
Perfect. All right. So I think that's all the questions I had from those security services from that perspective. Okay, so Nicole and I are going to step out of role now. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a switch around. Okay, so Nicole is going to be the customer, and then I'm going to be the AWS consultant advising Nicole on AWS services. Okay, so Nicole,
yes,
I'm going to help you.
Yeah. So we are going to move our applications to AWS. We decided, but we do have still some time before the data center lease expires. So we're just, we decided we lift and shift a little bit. Because we can't, optimize everything in one go. So we have a couple of things that we rebuilt from scratch in AWS, but there's a large number that needs to be lifted and shifted. And then we want to refactor our applications to be more cloud native, right? But they're quite huge applications, so it might take some time. Okay. But anyway, so for the time that these applications will basically just be copy and pasted into AWS, we really need to make sure that our networking setup is exactly like it is in our data center.
Right. Okay.
But obviously, we don't really know how we should go about this.
Okay. All right. So AWS has a product called AWS VPC, or the Virtual Private Cloud, that you can use to create networks with structures that are very, very similar to structures that you have in your own data center. The concepts around VPC are exactly the same as the concepts that you would use in your own data center. So you have subnets, you have routing, you have network access controls. I think it might be easier if I draw this up. So let's have a look. Let's just whiteboard this out. I think it's probably the easiest thing to do. So one thing with the virtual private cloud, one thing to understand, or the very first thing to understand about the virtual private cloud is that it is a regional construct. Okay, when we build a virtual private cloud, we build one in a specific region. Okay, so let's say, for example, I was building, I wanted to put my application in the Ireland region, maybe because all of my customers are in Europe, maybe because I've got compliance requirements that mean I have to store my data in Ireland. So the first thing you need to do with VPC is you need to choose which region you're going to build it in. Okay. When you build the VPC itself, so we'll just draw the actual region here.
Yeah.
When you build the VPC itself, that VPC spans across multiple, will span the entire region. Okay. So just to draw the VPC in here, it'll look like that. Okay. Now, in earlier sessions that we've had, when we spoke about the basic kind of layout of AWS, what does it look like from an infrastructure perspective? We spoke about availability zones. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that. A region is comprised of availability zones.
So in which availability zone will my VPC then be?
So what you can imagine it looking like is like this, where you have 3 availability zones in a region named A, B, and C. You might not want to use all of those availability zones for your VPC infrastructure, but the VPC will span them anyway, and they'll be available to your VPC.
Oh.
So in this case, in Ireland, 3 availability zones. Okay, so we've chosen the region, we've built our basic VPC inside our region. We can't really do anything with this VPC yet. And I'm imagining that from a kind of on-prem perspective, there's nothing really here that looks familiar to you at the moment, right?
Nope.
Okay. So this is where we start to think about placing subnets in our VPC. Okay. So actually, let me just move this down a little bit to give myself room. So we can start placing subnets in our VPC. We can place them across 3 subnets. We can place them across 2 subnets. I'm just going to use 2 subnets here. Okay, and I'm imagining, you know, coming from a data center perspective, you're very familiar with what the concept of a subnet is. Okay, it's just an isolated zone that hosts a specific type of workload. But we can create different types of subnets for different purposes. So we can create public subnets. We can create private subnets. So, for example, I might have a pair of public subnets. I might have a pair of private subnets. The reason we want to create pairs like this is because there's a golden rule at AWS that states never, ever build in a single availability zone. Okay? Because availability zones, they can fail. You know, we can't promise that a hurricane or a lightning strike or a fire or some kind of wild, you know, natural event won't take out an availability zone. So never ever build in a single availability zone. So what we might build here are public subnets and private subnets. Okay. Public subnets are subnets that can access the internet. Private subnets are subnets which public subnets can access the internet and can be accessed by the internet should you enable that. Private subnets can never be accessed from the internet, okay? But they can have optional access to the internet if you decide that's an architectural pattern you want to use.
Okay, so I could put my database, which I don't want to have any connection to the internet, in my private subnet, but allow it to, you know, go out of the internet to get a patch or something.
Exactly. So you could put your database server down here. We'll talk in a little while about some of the constructs that you can build within the VPC to enable this connectivity. So we put our database servers down here. You know, these are in these database servers. If we put them down here in the private subnet, then we could do things like, you know, synchronization across those databases. So we could have, you know, you may be doing this, you know, high availability clusters in your data center already. So we can synchronize databases across availability zones, that kind of thing. And then in our public subnets, we would have our kind of front end infrastructure here, maybe web servers, you know, EC2 instances, containers, whatever they need to be, things that would require access either to or from the internet, we would place within a public subnet. So this is kind of like the basic structure of our VPC. Okay.
So we talked about things getting into the internet and coming from the internet. So how do I actually make sure that only traffic that is allowed to go to my EC2 instance or my database can go in, and only things that I want to get out? Because it looks like if it's public, anyone can just come in and anything can go out. And
yes. So I mean, obviously, in the data center, we would protect things with a firewall. Yeah. So the firewall really just says what type of traffic is allowed to come in and go out. So is it HTTP traffic? Is it HTTPS traffic? I don't know. Maybe these public servers here aren't web servers. Maybe they're mail servers, and you're running an email infrastructure. So you would say, okay, well, we're allowing SMTP traffic in. One thing that I didn't mention here was that in order to be able to actually provide access to the internet, When you build a VPC, you need to build a device called an internet gateway.
Oh.
Okay. And this internet gateway kind of acts like the router between your public subnets and the internet itself. Okay. So the flow of traffic would look like this. You would have an instance going out through the internet gateway out to the internet, and you'd have traffic coming through the internet gateway and back into, you know, your public subnets down here, for example. Yeah. Now, the internet gateway in and of itself, I mean, your actual question was about how do I provide the security? Okay. Yep. The internet gateway in and of itself does not provide security. It provides some obscurity through NAT, but it's not really a security device. When we talk about security in these subnets, we talk about two separate AWS services that allow us to secure them. There's network access control lists and there's security groups. So there's two separate protections that you can use, but they work in slightly different ways. And I think in order to demonstrate that, it's probably better to actually, so this public subnet here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to redraw this and we're going to zoom into it so you can get an idea of what those protections look like just from the perspective of a single subnet. Okay. So here's our public subnet, and we've got the network access control list, as I mentioned, and the security group. Now we'll start with the network access control list. Okay. Now the network access control list is a protection that sits around the entire subnet. Okay. And you decide what traffic you want to allow to flow in and out of that or through that network access control list. Okay. So imagine you have an instance down here, and just to keep things simple, let's say that this is a service that's listening on port 80. It's more likely to be 443, but you know, let's just forget certificates and all that stuff for now. And you've got a client out here on the internet, and that client wants to use your online web store or whatever it is. I don't know, maybe they want to purchase something. They actually need to be able to communicate with that instance. Okay, so they do all the DNS stuff, they do all that, that's all fine. They've got an IP address. That IP address will then direct them down to that instance in that subnet. And we need to open a port to allow that traffic to flow through. One thing to bear in mind with network access control lists is that if you place more instances in that subnet, because the protection is around the subnet, then every instance benefits from that protection. Okay. All of these instances will be communicable on port 80 with a caveat, which I'll come to in a minute. Now, one other really key point to understand about network access control lists is that they are stateless. Okay. And what we mean by stateless is they don't remember any previous connections. So this, as far as the network access control list is concerned, is a previous connection. Okay. So this instance, we've only got one-way traffic so far. We've got a request. Okay. But we also need a response. The person, whoever it is sitting there waiting for a response from your web server. So the server formulates a response and tries to send it out. At this point, it could potentially be blocked by the network access control list. Okay. So we need to create rules in both directions with a network access control list. So we need to make sure that we're allowing that traffic to flow both in and out. Okay. The network access control list itself doesn't maintain any state. All right. Now, there is, so the network access control list protects the subnet, and the security group, there's another construct that I mentioned called the security group. Okay. And the security group is a separate protection that can be wrapped, around EC2 instances. Okay, so we create a security group that has the same kind of general idea in that you allow ports and services through the security group. Okay, so in this case, we would need to allow, let's just create a opening here to allow port 80 traffic to flow into our instance. The difference between network access control lists, or the key difference, is that security groups are actually stateful. Okay, you don't need to allow the traffic in both directions. You only need to allow it in one direction, because what the security group does is it's going to inspect that incoming or outgoing traffic and go, hang on a second, there is going to be a reply to this. So the security group just automatically allows that reply traffic to come through without having to explicitly state it here like you would in a network access control list. Okay.
So I would have to say to the security group when I set it up, just because this traffic came in doesn't mean it's allowed out if I just want traffic to go into EC2, but not out necessarily.
Well, the security group will maintain that kind of list of what's come in.
Mm-hmm.
If it's come in, it will be allowed out. Okay. But if you wanted to disallow that traffic from going out, you could do it at the network access control list. So you get that kind of multi-layer of protection. Yeah.
Okay.
And from the instance's perspective, or from the security group's perspective, kind of logically, you can kind of view it like that. It's going through the same control. You're not explicitly saying inbound, outbound. Yeah?
Okay.
So they're the two mechanisms that we can use. Now, a security group, like I said, it's you create a security group and then you attach it to instances. So you can attach a security group to multiple instances at the same time. So you can kind of scale your controls in that way. Instances within the same subnet can also have different. Whoops, that's the wrong thing. Instances within the same subnet can also have different security groups. So if I say want this instance to be able to, or these instances in this security group to be able to communicate with these instances in this security group over a specific port, then I can, it's very easy for me to enable that using security groups. Okay. So in the data center, what tends to happen is when you put devices in a single subnet, they can all talk to each other.
Yeah.
Okay. And that has caused some problems in the past through, a malware being installed and spreading through a single subnet and then being able to spread out. In the AWS VPC, you can protect even the devices because the protection is at the instance level.
So I could, in case something horrible happens, I could just change the security group and say this affected server is no longer allowed to talk to any other instance in my subnet.
Exactly. Yeah, okay. Exactly. You could just completely isolate it. And in fact, you could automate that process as well. So if you wanted to do, just maybe going a bit too much into detail here, but if you wanted to automate that process, you could say have a process where you tag an EC2 instance in a specific way. It launches a workflow that removes the security group from that instance and just completely isolates it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So all of this stuff can be automated as well.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Super. Yeah. Then security is sorted, but as I mentioned, so we're obviously moving things, across, and it takes time. So there will be some workloads that, for many different reasons, still have to be in our data center. First of all, we can't move everything in one go, but there's also some things that we still need to figure out with the regulator if we are allowed to move them.
I see.
So, and because of them being so sensitive, is there a way to connect our data center to the cloud, and also in a way where it ideally doesn't go over the public internet?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we could do is there's actually a number of ways to connect your data center to the cloud. There's one that's really easy to set up, really, really quick and easy, because essentially it's just software. There's another one that will actually require some time and some paperwork and some involvement of a connectivity partner. Okay, so we'll talk about the first one first, which is basically just doing a simple VPN. Okay, so you've got your corporate data center down here, as well as having the internet gateway. I like to think of the internet gateway as kind of like the front door to your VPC. Okay, it's kind of like, you can imagine it as being the internet router.
Yeah.
There is another device that we can build on or attach to a VPC called a virtual private gateway. Okay. I kind of think of this as being a bit like the back door to your VPC. Okay, it allows network traffic from private sources, not from the internet. Okay, so that's the virtual private gateway. So one way to do this, so you've got, let's say you've got a router here in your data center. What you could potentially do, your data center is connected to the internet, right?
Yeah.
Now you've already expressed that you may not really want to do this, but just for completeness, we'll talk about how this would work. You could just set up a VPN tunnel over the internet directly into a virtual private gateway. Very quick, very easy to set up, because essentially it's just software that you've already got the connectivity medium, the internet. It already exists. Yeah. And depending on what your regulator stipulates, you may be able to use this for some of your workloads. But there's one, obviously it's the internet. Everything that goes over a VPN tunnel here is encrypted. It's all IPsec encrypted, so it's it can't be snooped. It can't be manipulated. The traffic can't be manipulated in flight. And of course, the VPN provides the encryption, but the recommendation would be to also encrypt the data before you put it on the VPN. Okay. So from a security perspective, it's pretty safe. But your regulator might say, well, actually, no, you're not passing that data, that sensitive customer data, over the public internet.
Okay. And when it comes to speed, is the VPN a little bit, slower than?
Well, I mean, speed can mean a number of different things to different people. So there's latency and bandwidth. Okay. Now, obviously, latency on the internet is variable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So AWS or anyone can't give you any guarantees of latency across the internet. The other thing that you have to bear in mind is, if you're providing a service, you're providing a service to your customers, and you're giving an SLA on that service, right? You're saying if it goes down, we will get it back up, or whatever you say, within 15 minutes. How can you do that when you've made the internet? You're dependent on the internet, because there is no SLA on the internet. You can't get an SLA. So that's another reason why you might steer away from a VPN. In terms of bandwidth, a VPN tunnel, an AWS VPN tunnel, is limited to 1.25 gigabits per second. Okay, for a single VPN tunnel. But you can stack them on top of each other and use protocols like equal cost multipath routing, and get a higher bandwidth. Yeah. What I suspect you're after, and thinking about your actual question, is you're looking for what I would call a direct connect. Okay, which is where you actually have a private connection between your data center and the virtual private gateway. And this is a private dedicated fiber connection, okay? Available in sub 1 gigabits per second, 1 gigabit per second, 10 gigabit per second, and 100 gigabit per second. Now, obviously, AWS are not in the business of going round to business parks where your data center is and digging holes in the ground and laying cables. Okay, that's not our business. So we actually rely on connectivity partners to be able to provide this part of the connectivity here. So when we say people like connectivity partners, we think about people like Vodafone in the UK. Okay, so Vodafone have a global network. They're obviously connected to our direct connect locations. If you're using Vodafone for your WAN connectivity, then it's just a logical exercise for them to connect you through here to what we call the DirectX location, the direct connect location, and then we can push the packets then into your VPC. So you get guarantees around bandwidth, you get predictable latency, you get private traffic. We still recommend you encrypt your traffic over the direct connect, but it doesn't go anywhere near the internet.
Okay, so I'm basically on AWS's backbone the moment I have my own connection.
Yeah, so the traffic, if you imagine the traffic from the from your data center to AWS from the traffic's perspective, first thing it'll do is hit the router in your data center. Then it would be routed over a partner network to get into the direct connect location. And then from the direct connect location, it would be routed directly into your VPC. So it doesn't touch the internet at all.
That sounds good.
Okay. I've just realized, I know we're running out of time, but I've just realized there's one thing that I forgot to mention. And you asked about this earlier. You said we could potentially have outbound access from private networks, from private subnets within our VPCs. And yeah, we can do that. There is a device that you can, or a service, I should say, that you can use in the VPC called a NAT gateway. And what that NAT gateway enables you to do is send traffic from private subnets. You can proxy out. It kind of works like an outbound proxy. You can proxy that traffic into a NAT gateway in a public subnet. Remember, these subnets down here don't have access to the internet, but these subnets do because they're public. So we can send that traffic to a device in a public subnet and then kind of have that proxied via the internet gateway and then off to the internet from there. But this is only for outbound. Okay, so you can't initiate connections that go through the NAT gateway and into your database connection from the internet.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Sorry, the drawings become a little bit busy. All right. Okay. I think that was all the questions that you had, right?
Yep. That's all I needed to know.
Awesome. Nice to meet you.
Yep.
This is great conversation. Yeah, this way of learning hopefully helps a lot of people, and this also helps you to understand that how you may formulate the question. So the way you should answer question when you are in a customer meeting, that you satisfy what is there and also give some additional information about it. Also, it is very important to understand why a customer is looking for a specific service. So I don't think a customer would ever come to you and say, hey, I want to use Amazon S3. Even if they come to that, you should also understand that what is the use case they are trying to solve. Maybe there is a better service than S3 for their use case, or they misunderstood the S3 would solve the problem. So rather than giving technical solution, you should focus on providing a business solution and then see how technology can map to that business solution. So that's what things we discuss here. So pay attention to how the customer and interaction happened, how we revealed information. We don't want to confuse customer with lot of information in very single go, and based on the question and feedback we can move forward. Thank you so much, Nicole and Richard. It was really nice interacting with you, and we have answered a lot of questions. But if your question do not get answered, or if you're still confused, reach out to us independently if you want to, or send a YouTube comment, and in comment we would be responding. Should not be an issue at all. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Nicole. I will now add Remy to the screen. Hi, Remy, you are up. And Remy
Hi.
would help us in setting up a quiz. Remy has done a tremendous job in setting up a quiz for you all. So we would talk about a quiz little bit, and then we would give you the link into the next email so that you can practice that thing on your own. So that should be giving you more expertise and give you more confidence on passing the exam. So over to you, Remy.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks a lot, Ashish. Thanks for the discussions and the great comments that we have on the chat. So we know that you are
Remy,
preparing your
can you
certification.
introduce yourself a little bit? Your first
Yes,
time on the
sure.
channel, so better would be that you introduce yourself.
Sure, sure. So my name is Remy Sardin. I'm also working for AWS. So I'm a senior technical instructor. As you can hear from my beautiful accent, I'm located in France, in Paris, the beautiful city of Paris, and I'm delivering courses uh, intermediate, advanced topics like architecting AWS, advanced architecting, security topics as well, cloud financial management. And I'm working for AWS since now 4 years and 7 months now. So time is running. So I started my career more like on the operational field. So working as a network engineer, security engineer, and I even joined AWS as a technical account manager. And I'm really thrilled to be here to help all of these folk ramping up on this AWS journey and try to help them to also being become a solution architect. Bienvenue. Yes, I love the French that we have on the chat. So what we proposed for you on the BISA workshop is to have a kind of quizzes, because we know that you're going to learn a lot during all of these weeks, and a great way to reinforce the learning is via, in fact, quizzes, questions, so like that you can rethink about what you've seen during the sessions. And if things is not clear, in fact, that's also a way for us in the next session to see, oh, okay, maybe this point is not really clear, and we come back and make an assumption on those elements. So what we're going to use is the platform that you have on the screen share. It's called Quizzes. So we're going to share with you at the end of the session the link for you. So it's really easy. In fact, when you go to the link, they're going to ask you for a nickname, or we advise you, if it's possible, just to log in to the platform. So like that, we can track your advancement into your learning. So like that, we know that if, for example, you have some difficulties, we can address them into the sessions of BISA. So when you enter, in fact, your name, so for example, let's put uh, name here, you just start, and then you will see that you get redirected with all of the player. So right now, in fact, those game is not started, so you're going to start the game, and you will have the assessments. So a kind of a quizzes game where you're going to have a couple of the questions related to each of the domains. So, for example, for cloud practitioners, we have 4 domains for the certifications. So we decided to put 10 questions per domain. So, for example, domain 1 is basically about the cloud concept, what you've seen last week. Now, for today, you've seen all of the concepts related to security and networking. So we have a second quiz on security and networking. Next week, there will be another domain, which will be on the cloud technology and services. So you will have another quizzes. So typically, you have some of the questions. You're going to ask those questions. You choose your answer. For example, what is the AWS shared responsibility model? Thanks for playing the game. It's an assessment. Don't play the game right away. In fact, so for example, I will follow the guys on the comments. So let's say this is A, and then you move forward. And when you validate, in fact, those, you're going to have all of these questions. And at the end, you have your result, how many answers you get right, how many answers you get wrong. And for us, is for you to also be close to you to understand, okay, what are the pain points? So like that, we can address it during the next session of BISA. Any question, feel free to ask on the chat. And that's it for me. Really enjoy to join the BISA team as well.
Thank you, Remy. That was interesting. So we would share the link for the quiz into the follow-up email. We don't want you to get distracted right now. I know it is interesting to play, but hold on to that. We would share the link with you on to this. And there are limitation on the platform, so we can have only 1,000 people into the quiz at a time. So if you go beyond that number, probably you would miss it. So as soon as we send the email, we quickly request everyone to go through that quiz. You pass it or not, it's a different story, but you attempt it or not, that is more important. See, I told about consistency. So consistency is important. If you are not able to answer everything, that's completely fine. That's why you are here. And if we find that there are some question which most of you missed, then probably we will look into that data and then move forward and explain those concepts to you. So it would be best if you could provide the actual name of yours and register the platform, like you create an account and then attempt the quiz. So you would be able to see your own progress over 4 weeks. And if you have any question and all, you can revisit, and then it will be a better approach for learning towards that. Thank you, Remy, for that. I know it's a lot of technical concept and challenges there to create quizzes. Thanks for doing that. Thank you. All right. Now I'm coming back on the stage and I'll talk a little bit on the well architected side. Just to give you an idea, we talked about an architect. Now, a common question which you may get from yourself if you're designing something, are you well architected? Now, I talk to customers, and when we talk about this question, depends on the answer. It depends. So, well architected, some people would say, yes, we are well architected. We followed all the best practices. Now, my second question comes on that, how you would be proving that you are well architected or not. So that's why we need to be aware that what are the various aspects of being well architected. I can't be just saying I'm well architected and nobody is going to believe me unless I prove that I'm well architected. So I'll talk about that particular session. I'll talk about what we are going to discuss into this particular track. I prefer to explain things to analogies if you know me. So let's start with an analogy that consider you are an architect or a builder and you have to build a house. So you are designing or building a house, that is your main requirement. Now, what you are doing to do, let me ask you this question that these are the requirement customer has already explained you, right? So customer has said that it would need 3 bedroom, one study room for kids, a 2 bathroom, maybe kitchen in north direction, parking space for 2 car. This is what the customer has provided to you. These are the basic information, and that is what we call a functional requirement. A house would not be considered complete if I was not able to provide 2 parking spaces, or instead of 3 bedrooms, I have created 2 bedrooms only. So these are functional requirement, which is very, very important to be fulfilled by whatever design you are building. Think of it, it is a business problem which you are solving, or business requirement. Like this could be something which you cannot ignore, and you have to go ahead and implement all the solution for you. So these are considered as your functional requirement. You have to take care of that. All right, so make sure that you are aware. Now the next question comes, okay, I would provide all this information, but are some common consideration? That is a open question to all of you. If you are building a house, apart from taking care of information or taking care of things like, okay, I would need 2 room or 3 room, I would need a garage space and all, what are some other information, what are some non-functional requirement for a house, what are some common consideration you would use for building a house, right? What it could be, fire safety, yes, exactly. So that is something you should be taking care. Now a customer may not tell you about all these things, and you may have to think on your feet, probably not on your feet, but based on some framework or proven mechanism by which you should be providing these questions answer. So fireproof, any survey that we need to answer after the live session, we will talk about that. There is no survey actually. And centralized AC could be one requirement, Sudhanshu. Now it can depend from the location. If you are building a house in Norway, probably centralized AC may not be required, but if you're building a house in Dubai, that could be a requirement. So I would always say it depends. Child friendly, again, it depends. If it is a house for elderly people, I may have to design it differently. Land in water prone zone, exactly. Location, which branch to use, yes. Nice house, by the way, thank you. It depends, I agree on that. Security. So these are some common consideration, right? So customer won't tell you that, but being an architect, it is expected that you would design that solution in that. Now, consider you are building a car, you created the fastest car on the earth, but there is no seat for driver. He has to stand and drive. I don't think that would be very comfortable car to drive along, right? So that is something which is which is not explained explicitly, but being an architect, you have to take care of that water viability time to time, exactly. So some non-functional requirement I could think of, it should be well constructed. I'm just picking some information here. It should follow the regulation, maybe fire regulation, electricity regulation, sewerage regulation. I have to take care of that. Obviously, it should be secure. Nobody will ever come to you as a customer and say, hey, bring me the best house or build me the best house, but it should be completely unsecured. That never is going to happen. Should be cost effective, right? So I may want to use maybe Italian marble in my kitchen, but I probably will not be happy if I use Italian marble into my garage space. It is too much costly for me. So some places it would require something, some place it would require something else. So it should be cost effective. It should be sustainable. It should be able to sustain in the sense that maybe we can provision for water drainage, maybe my water collection or rainwater harvesting, or maybe we can think about solar panels for that. So obviously, I would be needing those particular things also to be taken into consideration. It should require less maintenance also, like you created a house and it operates purely on battery, and battery runs out every 40 hours, and every 40 hour you have to recharge everything in the whole house, otherwise it completely shut down. So that may not work best. So these are some common consideration like proper ventilation, wind and airflow, drainage system, sewerage, and fire electricity. These all you have to take into consideration. Now, if you look from an application perspective, I don't think there is much difference there. Basic concepts remain the same. Now let's think about an application, and your requirement is that you have to build an application Obviously customer would be providing the requirement. Let's say it has to be accounting application, it has to be HR application, it has to be a banking application, it has to be a telephone application, whatever it is. So customer will provide the functional requirements for that, and you as an architect, you have to take care of that functional requirement as well as non-functional requirement, or I call them non-verbal requirement. Nobody will explicitly say it should be secure. You need to ensure that you are able to provide best security for the application you are building. So these are what I will consider as a non-functional requirement. And what can be these non-functional requirement? Let me ask you this question. So you are building an application, could be anything. You could think of a banking application, maybe you are thinking of it as a application which you are building for your internal use or whatever. What could be some non-functional requirement you should consider? Ramakrishna is going for performance. Yes, exactly. So yes, that we will take care of. Security, Anupama, exactly. Security is very, very important. It should be sustainable. Oleg, completely agree on that. We are having to ensure that we are carbon neutral. And AWS is working toward that. Saurabh is saying availability. Mary is talking about scalability, cost, obviously. So these are some common characteristics. Now, consider when you answered, did you talked about application? Probably not, but this is a common characteristic of every application you would be building. Like you're hiring for a role, or let's say you are giving an interview. So interviewer will always check some common characteristic apart from your technical skills, like, hey, are you a constant learner, or are you having a good moral character, or are you a good communicator, or are you able to write good language or good letters or good email. So these are common thing which is tested by everyone, and same applies to your application too. If I give you some basic information about that, an application should be well architected. It should follow local regulation. Like Richard was mentioning that there are some PCI compliances or GDPR compliances I have to take care. It should be secure. It should be cost effective. It should be sustainable. It should be less maintenance, should be high available, should be having a better performance. So as you could see that there are not much of a difference when you build a house or when you build an application. When you start making that connection between a real life scenario and your technical application, you would probably be able to have a better understanding of the solution. So this is what you would be needing for making your application the best possible application. That is just some basic information I have talked about. Now, what we have done in AWS, that obviously we need to come up with a method that we can provide this type of well architected framework to every customer, not just one single customer. Now, how is well architected driven? Let me talk about that first. So in 2012, there was some outage into US East region. That was the impact on Amazon EC2 and Amazon EBS. These two services were impacted on October 22, 2012. It happened into US East region. And when a regional failure is happening, we expect that lot of customers would be suffering because of that. Yes, it happened. Lot of customer had some issues and their services could not function. Maybe they could not log in. Maybe their customer could not log in. Whatever happened, that was bad for them. But in the same time, when the outage was there were some customer, for them the sun was still shining and they were able to still keep their application running. So that gave us a food for thought that okay, there was a outage and some customer got impacted, some customer did not got impacted. What they have done differently, what they have done into their architecture, so that they have created a solution which could sustain these type of problem. So we started digging into that information, and based on that we have come up with well architected. So it is purely driven by a real life scenario. We realize that some customer have designed their solution in a highly resilient manner. Why can't we replicate the same type of information for other customers also? And that's how our well architected framework was created. So well architected framework started in 2012. Initially it was driven by AWS solution architect, and later in point in time we made it a self service tool so people can directly go ahead and perform this well architected reviews on their own. So we'll be focusing on this particular pillars into all the all these sections which is coming up. So when we talk about well-architected framework, it is made up of pillars and lenses. It talks about best practices, it talks about design principle, and it asks you some intriguing question by which you can answer and confirm that are you well architected or not. So that is what all well-architected framework is made up of. We will discuss about each of the pillars as we move forward. Now, can anyone remember some of the pillars of well-architected framework? There are 6 pillars as of now. Is anyone having knowledge about all 6 pillars which are there? So I'm getting options: performance efficiency, operational excellence, reliability, cost optimization, security. Yes, these are some pillars of this well architected framework, and we'll talk about each of them as we move forward. So we will be in every week, we will talk about, let's say next week, I'll pick up operational excellence. We'll then talk about security, then we'll talk about reliability in this particular section, and then we will be focusing on cost optimization, performance efficiency, and sustainability. So these are the common things which we will be discussing into this well-architected framework as we move forward. What I'll do, I'll take a fictitious scenario that a customer has migrated their on-prem environment to cloud and now they want to make it well architected. What type of services will help them, how they would go ahead with the journey. So we'll take a scenario-based learning, we'll take a very basic architecture initially, and we'll expand that architecture so that we should be able to integrate all the best practices of well architected framework. So that's what my plan is to cover into the next coming section of well architecting. All right. So I hope this thing is clear. What we are going to discuss is at least clear, and we will talk about this pillar more further, and we'll discuss more of the details. I'll stop here. And now I'll talk a little bit on the giveaways, which we have done last week. And any question related to well architected, feel free to send them across. We will, as I said, we will take a scenario based learning approach. We'll take a cloud application and make it well architected over the 6 weeks of the time when we discuss it. Talking about giveaways, we have a weekly giveaway, and there would be a link shared by Prasad in a minute. We also listen to the feedback which was given to us that, hey, we cannot join live because of the time zone difference. So can you do something about giveaways for the people who watch live videos afterward? So we would have some giveaways which we will be also sharing into the follow-up email. And just to announce what we have achieved last week, these are the people who have won these particular giveaways, and the registration link should be there into the chat now, and then you should be able to register there. You didn't get the giveaway, it is a selection automatically randomized, so not everyone gets a giveaway. Naveen, we are selecting 10 random people, and here is the list of people we selected last week, and one of them got Cloud Career Journey ebook, and 10 other people got access to the sandbox environment for BizLab. So it's not for everyone. We have limited quantity, and we are randomizing selection of the people based on whatever and whoever fills up the form. So that's what we are doing here. All right. Now, Prasad, I'm not sure if you are on call. If you are there, can you please share the link for the giveaway? And that should be giving you access to the registration form. So, so we will send you the link in a minute or so, and then you should be able to register there. This link would be active for 24 hours. If we are not able to share it right now, we would do it into the email, and then you would have access to that. All right. So hopefully that should give you some idea. Now, we are also giving some access to 50% discount. So there is some 50% discount for books which we are having here, Cloud Career Journey ebook, and there is a starter kit. Starter kit talks about the ebook, plus it has mentoring and it has lots of resources. Like you get 6 month access to WizLab and Pluralsight platform where you can enhance your learning, and you can also get access to the group mentoring session we deliver, and you will also get roadmap and other discount voucher for the services. So that should be there, should not be a problem at all. So that is what I wanted to talk about, some basic stuff. Now what I want to give talk about some more thing about testimonial. So what I have done, I have shared a link into LinkedIn group where you can provide testimonial for the BESA session. So make sure that you provide your candid feedback about it. We are building a new website, and will try to include your information there also. So please share your feedback about it, that how you are liking Pesa. Thank you for people who have already provided the feedback. So keep it limited to 25 to 40 words, and then we should be able to include it into our new website. So that's all I wanted to talk about. And now I will hand it over to Prasad if he wants to share some more details. I'm not sure if there is a time available for the next session about the learn and be curious, but I'll let you decide, Prasad, whether we should go ahead with that session or not. I'll add you to the stage now.
Thanks, Ashish. I have shared the link in the group for everyone for the BESA rewards. That's the link if you see. Register. There's a question that do we need to register again? Yes, every week we need to register because it will be for the people who are registering every week. We are going to randomize. Randomly pick 10 people and 1 people. So you need
And
to
yeah,
register.
if you won already, then probably will not pick up your name because it doesn't make sense. So if you are already won the prize, probably you should not register. It doesn't make sense,
No, Ashish,
and we will pick
sorry,
you.
I have.
Yeah.
Sorry, you register again, please, because the point
Oh
is,
yeah, 12
at the
weeks.
end of the 12 weeks, we have a mega prize.
Yeah,
And that would be based on all the
exactly.
registrations that has happened. So every week, if you register, you will be able to have that. And the mega prize is
Hmm.
12 months access to Vizlab Premium. So what you're giving access right now as a giveaway is 3 months access to AWS Sandbox. In fact, Ashish, we should demo the AWS Sandbox from Vizlab in one of the session to
In next
showcase
time, yes.
how people can actually use AWS Sandbox from Vizlabs to do their hands-on exercises. And the Premium Plus access that we'll be providing to the 10 people at the end of all the sessions, and that will depend upon multiple things. It will depend upon the engagement activity you're uh, engaging with here in the chat, in the LinkedIn group, the quizzes that we'll be sending. We'll be soon doing a cloud quest. So it will depend upon the participation that you will be doing, and then we'll be choosing the 10 people. That 10 people will not be random. It will depend upon the activity level of activity that we are tracking across all the people that who are joining us. And that will give access to 12 months of entire Vizlabs platform, whether it is practice tests, AWS sandboxes, or GCP sandbox, or Azure sandbox, their videos, all the platform that they have, you'll have entire access for 12 months. We also provide access of that entire platform for 6 months as part of the starter kit, as Ashish mentioned. In starter kit, which for the BESA members, we are providing 50% discount. That has 6 months access to entire Vizlabs platform, 6 months access to entire Pluralsight platform, and then there will be extra group mentoring sessions that we will be conducting. And there are other things that you can look into the Gumroad link that we have. I know
Yep,
that we are
makes
over
sense.
time. I wanted to share a few things on the Learn and Be Curious, but I don't think there's a point in rushing it. So let's do it next week. One thing that I would like to say before, instead of getting that, how many people are actually planning for Cloud Practitioner certification in next 2 to 3 weeks? If you are, please put it in the chat. If you are planning for Cloud Practitioner certification in next 2 to 3 weeks, because that's the whole plan for this BESA batches, that helping you achieve Cloud Practitioner in the 4 weeks, and then in the next 8 weeks we will try and help you get AWS Solution Architect Associate certifications. Okay, cool. There are a few people who are planning for Cloud Practitioner certification. Great. So do follow the email that we have sent that has learning resources. It has learning resources to a skill builder course that you should be able to complete. So do spend time in learning, at least 5 to 10 hours in a week to go through those courses. And depending upon any specific vertical that you would like to choose, we are also in the email, if you read, there are courses that goes dive deep. Like, for example, if you want to go into compute, there is a course that dive deeps into compute. And this week we'll be sharing similarly the courses for security and networking. And
Yep.
yes, hopefully even these first 4 sessions that we are doing for Cloud Practitioner, who already have Cloud Practitioner, it will be useful for them, and who are planning for SA Associate certifications, right? That's why we are trying to have it in a conversational manner to showcase how actually a solutions architect interact with a customer, or how customer comes up with a problem, and how a cloud professional tries and understand their requirements and work backward from there. And from the next week, as Ashish will show, it will be more on the well architected along with the conversational that will keep going on.
Yeah, that's the idea, and we want to ensure that we give you the material which caters to your technical need as well as behavioral need. So give us ideas, give us suggestion. The mail which we share for the learning resources, you don't have to go to everything. There are lots of resources. We are trying to create resources so that some people learn by doing things, some people learn by reading, some people learn by watching. So we are trying to incorporate multiple methods of learning into those final emails, and then you should be able to get into the details of it. So last week email was sent out. If you did not get it, check the spam email. If you still don't get it, ping me your email address on LinkedIn, and I should be able to get you into the list, right? This week's email will probably go into the Monday. Tomorrow is Sunday and we may be a little busy, but by Monday you should receive this week's email, which would have link for the Remy's quizzes, which will have link for additional resources, and we would keep this particular link for giveaway active for 24 hours. So if you are watching it late also, you should still be able to get into it. All right. Any final thoughts, anyone?
All the winners of the week one, it will be great if you're able to make a LinkedIn post tagging Wiz Labs. It will be, like they are helping us and helping the community. So it will be good to share that love with them and give them some visibility.
Makes sense. And I'll add last time everyone onto the stage so we can say bye to you. And then probably feel free to add any questions or any details if we have missed. We would be happy to answer there's many questions. Kapil dropped off because of some work, but everyone else is here. So thanks everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you all here. And thanks all volunteers for answering so many questions. There are some questions which we could not answer. So feel free to send it across again, and we would hopefully be able to move forward from that. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.